The transport ship moved slowly through space toward the human station. Commander Zextar stood at the window and watched the metal structure grow larger as they got closer. The station was not beautiful like the crystal towers of his homeworld. It was simple and rough, built for work rather than looks. But it was big, very big, and it floated in space like a metal mountain. Zextar was 7 feet tall and had 4 strong arms. His skin was dark green and covered with thick plates like armor. Scars ran across his face and arms from many battles. He had fought in 300 wars across 40 different star systems. Other alien races feared him. They spoke his name in whispers. When he walked into a room, everyone became quiet and bowed their heads. Today would be different, he thought. Today he would meet the humans for the first time. He had heard strange stories about this young race. They had only been traveling between stars for a short time, maybe 50 years. Most races took thousands of years to learn space travel. Humans had done it very fast. Too fast, some said. The docking bay doors opened with a loud noise. Zextar walked down the ramp from his ship. His heavy boots made loud sounds on the metal floor. He wore his best battle armor, polished until it shined. Medals and honors from many wars covered his chest. Any alien who saw him would know immediately that a great warrior had arrived, but the humans who waited for him did not look impressed. They stood in a straight line, wearing simple blue uniforms. A woman with short brown hair stepped forward. She was small, maybe 5.5 feet tall. Next to Zextar, she looked like a child. "Welcome to the UES Liberty," she said with a smile. "I am Ambassador Lisa Carter. This is Colonel Jake Morrison, our military advisor." The man beside her had gray hair and kind eyes. He was older than the woman, but still much smaller than Zextar. The colonel stepped forward and held out his hand. Zextar had learned about human handshaking from other races. He reached out with one of his 4 arms and shook the small human hand. "Commander Zextar," Jake Morrison said, "we have heard about your service record. Welcome aboard our station." Zextar waited for more. Usually when someone mentioned his service record, they would talk about his great battles. They would ask about his famous victories. They would want to hear his war stories. But the colonel just smiled and stepped back. "If you will follow us," Ambassador Carter said, "we can begin our meetings right away. We have much to discuss about trade between our peoples." Trade. Zextar had come here to talk about military alliance. The humans were new to space, and they would need protection. Other alien races were not always friendly to newcomers. Zextar had planned to offer his services as a military advisor. With his experience, he could teach the humans how to fight and win wars. They walked through the station corridors. Zextar noticed that the walls were plain gray metal. No decorations or art made them beautiful. Everything looked useful but not fancy. Humans walked past them, going about their work. Some looked at Zextar with interest, but none seemed afraid. This was very strange. On his home world, young colonians would run away when they saw a warrior like him. Even grown adults would step aside and lower their eyes. But these humans just nodded politely and continued with their jobs. A few even smiled and said hello. The meeting room was simple like everything else on the station. A long table sat in the middle with chairs around it. Large windows showed the stars outside. Ambassador Carter sat at one end of the table. Colonel Morrison sat beside her. Other humans took seats around the table. They introduced themselves, but Zextar forgot their names quickly. He was still confused by their calm behavior. "Commander Zextar," Ambassador Carter began, "we understand you represent the Colonian Empire in this region of space. We hope to establish good relations with your people." "Yes," Zextar said. His deep voice filled the room. "The Colonian Empire is strong. We control many star systems. We have powerful fleets and great armies." He paused, waiting for the humans to show proper respect for his empire's might. "That sounds very impressive," Colonel Morrison said. "We are still learning about our neighbors in this part of space. The Colonian Empire must have a long and rich history." "We do," Zextar replied. "We have fought many wars. I myself have commanded forces in over 300 battles. I have conquered worlds and defeated enemies that other races thought were unbeatable. He leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. Now surely the humans would understand who they were dealing with. 300 battles was more than most warriors fought in 10 lifetimes. His reputation should speak for itself. 300 battles, repeated Captain Amy Rodriguez, a woman in a dark blue uniform. She had been quiet until now. That must have been very difficult. War is never easy. Zextar blinked his 4 eyes. That was not the response he expected. Where was the amazement? Where were the questions about his greatest victories? The captain spoke about his battles like they were just hard work, not glorious achievements. Yes, he said slowly, war is the greatest test of a warrior. Only the strong survive. Only the clever win. My grandfather always said something like that, Captain Rodriguez replied. He fought in several wars when he was young. He used to tell me that surviving was more important than winning. Your grandfather, Zextar thought. This young human talked about war like it was a family story. How could her grandfather have fought in several wars? Humans had only been in space for 50 years. Before that, they were stuck on one world. What wars did your grandfather fight? Zextar asked. Oh, different ones, Captain Rodriguez said. There was a big war when he was very young. Then later he served in smaller conflicts. He never talked about them much, said they were not pleasant memories. Ambassador Carter cleared her throat. Perhaps we should focus on our trade discussions. We have prepared some proposals for exchanging goods between our civilizations. But Zextar was no longer interested in trade. He was thinking about Captain Rodriguez's grandfather. How could one human have fought in multiple wars on a single world? And why would a warrior not want to talk about his battles? On Colonia, old warriors spent their days telling stories about their victories to anyone who would listen. The meeting continued for 2 more hours. The humans talked about shipping routes and cargo manifests. They discussed mining rights and technology exchanges. It was all very boring for Zextar. He had come here expecting to talk about military matters, about strategy and tactics, and the art of war. Instead, these humans wanted to discuss business like merchants. When the meeting ended, Ambassador Carter stood up. Commander Zextar, we have prepared quarters for you during your stay. Tomorrow we can continue our discussions. Tonight, we have arranged a dinner where you can meet more of our people. That would be acceptable, Zextar said. He was tired from the long trip and confused by the strange behavior of these humans. Perhaps at dinner he would have better luck impressing them with his military experience. As he walked to his quarters, Zextar thought about the day. Something was wrong. Here. These humans should have been honored to meet a warrior of his reputation. They should have asked for his advice and wisdom. Instead, they treated him like just another diplomat. Maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe at dinner, he would find humans who understood the importance of military strength. Maybe then he could tell them about his greatest victories and see the proper respect in their eyes. He did not know that tomorrow would begin the most surprising education of his long life. The dining hall on the human station was not what Zextar expected. Long tables filled the room and humans sat together eating and talking loudly. They laughed and told jokes like they were at a celebration, not a formal dinner with an important alien visitor. The smell of cooked food filled the air. It was different from Colonian food, but not unpleasant. Ambassador Carter led Zextar to a table near the front of the room. Several humans were already sitting there wearing different, colored uniforms. They stood up when he approached, but not in the stiff military way he was used to. They looked relaxed and friendly. Commander Zextar, Ambassador Carter said, please meet some of our senior staff. This is Captain Amy Rodriguez, who you met earlier, Dr. Helen Brooks, our Chief Medical Officer, Engineer Pete Walsh, who keeps our station running, and Lieutenant Commander Gary Chen, our Security Chief. Each human shook his hand as they were introduced. Zextar noticed that their grips were firm despite their small size. Captain Rodriguez pulled out a chair for him. It was bigger than the others, specially made for his large frame. We hope you like the food, Dr. Brooks said as they all sat down. Our cooks tried to prepare something that would be safe for Colonian biology. We studied your dietary needs from the diplomatic files. The food was served on large plates. Zextar recognized some of the vegetables, but the way they were cooked was new to him. The meat was cut into small pieces and covered with a brown sauce. It tasted good, better than he expected from a space station. "This is excellent," Zextar said. "Your cooks have skill." "Thank you," Engineer Walsh replied. "Most of our crew take turns cooking. It helps pass the time during long assignments." The conversation was light and pleasant. The humans asked about his journey and his home world. They seemed genuinely interested in Colonian culture and customs. Zextar began to relax. Perhaps these humans were simply different in their social customs. Perhaps they would show proper respect once they understood his achievements better. After they finished eating, Zextar decided it was time to establish his credentials properly. He straightened in his chair and cleared his throat. The humans looked at him expectantly. "I would like to share a story with you," he said. "A story of one of my greatest victories. Perhaps it will help you understand the kind of military experience I can offer your people." "We would be honored to hear it," Ambassador Carter said. Zextar smiled. Finally, he would get the reaction he deserved. He began to speak in his deep, commanding voice. 10 years ago, I was sent to defend the fortress world of Vorthak Prime. It was a key strategic position that controlled 3 important trade routes. The enemy had gathered a massive army to take it. 10,000 soldiers surrounded our fortress. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. 10,000 enemies was an impressive force by any standard. I had only 200 soldiers under my command. The odds were 50-1 against us. Any reasonable commander would have surrendered or tried to escape, but I am not any commander. Dirty. Humans listened quietly. Zextar could see he had their attention now. For 60 days and 60 nights we held that fortress. The enemy attacked us every day. They used heavy weapons and tried to climb our walls. They tunneled under us and flew over us, but we did not break. We fought with courage and skill. We used every trick of war I had learned in my many battles. Zextar's voice grew stronger as he remembered the glory of that siege. On the 60th day, reinforcements finally arrived. The enemy army was scattered and defeated. We had held against impossible odds. It was the greatest defense in Colonian history. He finished his story and waited for the amazed silence that always followed. This tale had left alien diplomats speechless with admiration. Military commanders from other races had asked to study his tactics from that battle. But Captain Rodriguez just nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds very challenging," she said. "Holding a position against such odds must have been difficult for you and your soldiers." Zextar blinked. That was it? No questions about his brilliant strategy? No amazement at his tactical genius? "Yes," he said slowly. "It was difficult. Many of my soldiers were wounded. Some died defending the walls. War always cost lives," Captain Rodriguez said quietly. "My grandfather used to tell me about a battle like that. He called it Stalingrad. The defenders held a city for over 5 months against a much larger enemy force." Zextar's 4 eyes focused on her with interest. 5 months? That is longer than my siege. Tell me about this battle." Captain Rodriguez took a sip of her drink. "Well, it happened during a big war on Earth. The enemy had surrounded the city and was trying to capture it. The defenders refused to give up even when most of the city was destroyed. They fought house to house, room to room. My grandfather said it was like fighting in hell." "How many defenders were there?" Zextar asked. "I'm not sure of the exact numbers," Captain Rodriguez replied. "But I think there were maybe a few 100,000 soldiers and civilians trapped in the city. A few 100,000. Zextar felt a strange feeling in his stomach. That was more than 1,000 times larger than his force at Vorthak Prime. "And the enemy?" he asked. "Maybe 1 million soldiers with tanks and aircraft. They had surrounded the whole city." Zextar was quiet for a moment. 1 million enemies. The numbers were hard to believe. "This battle," he said carefully. "It was unusual. For your people?" Captain Rodriguez shook her head. "Not really. There were many sieges like that during the war. Some were even longer. My grandfather said humans have a bad habit of refusing to surrender even when the situation looks hopeless." Engineer Walsh laughed. "That's true, we're stubborn that way. Once we decide to defend something, we tend to stick with it no matter what. Even when it's stupid, added Lieutenant Commander Chen with a grin. Dr. Brooks nodded. It's part of our nature, I think. We don't like to give up. Zextar felt confused. These humans talked about defending against impossible odds like it was a common thing, like it was normal behavior. On Colonia, his siege at Vorthak Prime was studied in military schools as an example of perfect defensive strategy. But these humans made it sound like just another day at work. This Stalingrad battle, he said. Who won? The defenders, Captain Rodriguez replied. Eventually. It took months, but they held the city. The enemy was forced to retreat. And your grandfather was there? Yes, he was just a young soldier then. He said it was the worst thing he ever experienced. He never liked talking about it much. Said war wasn't something to be proud of, just something that sometimes had to be done. Zextar frowned. Not something to be proud of. War was the highest calling of a warrior. Victory in battle was the greatest honor a soldier could achieve. How could this human grandfather not be proud of surviving such a terrible siege? Perhaps, he said slowly, I could learn more about human military history. You seem to have interesting experiences. Ambassador Carter smiled. I think that could be arranged. Dr. Paul Anderson is our station historian. He knows quite a lot about Earth's military past. I'm sure he would be happy to speak with you. That would be educational, Zextar said. As the dinner continued, Zextar found himself thinking about Captain Rodriguez's story. 5 months, 1 million enemies, a few 100,000 defenders. The numbers didn't make sense to him. How could such a battle be considered normal for humans? And why wasn't the grandfather proud of his victory? Any Colonian warrior who survived such a battle would spend the rest of his life telling the story to anyone who would listen. These humans were very strange. They had power, but didn't seem to know it. They had achieved great victories, but acted like they were nothing special. It was all very confusing for a warrior who had spent his life seeking glory in battle. Maybe this Dr. Anderson could explain things better. Maybe he could help Zextar understand why these humans reacted so strangely to his war stories. He didn't know that tomorrow would begin to show him just how little he really knew about war. The next morning, Zextar woke up early. He had not slept well. His mind kept thinking about the dinner conversation. The story about Stalingrad troubled him. He was used to being the one with the most impressive war stories. But Captain Rodriguez had spoken about battles that made his greatest victory seem small. After eating breakfast, he made his way to the station's library. Ambassador Carter had told him where to find Dr. Paul Anderson. The library was quiet and filled with screens and books. Zextar had never seen so many books in one place. On Colonia, most information was stored in computers. Dr. Anderson was sitting at a desk reading from a large book. He was an older human with white hair and glasses. When he saw Zextar, he stood up and smiled. Commander Zextar, he said, shaking hands. Ambassador Carter told me you were interested in learning about human military history. I'm honored to help. Yes, Zextar said, sitting in a chair that creaked under his weight. Captain Rodriguez told me a story last night that I found interesting. I would like to learn more about human warfare. Dr. Anderson's eyes lit up. Excellent. Where would you like to start? We have records going back thousands of years. Humans have been fighting wars for a very long time. Thousands of years? Zextar asked. But you have only been traveling in space for 50 years. What wars did you fight before that? Oh, we fought each other, Dr. Anderson said simply. Humans have always been good at war. Maybe too good. We fought over land, resources, ideas, religion. Sometimes we fought just because we didn't like each other. This was strange to Zextar. Most alien races stopped fighting among themselves once they developed space travel. They found better things to do with their time and energy. Tell me about your greatest military leaders, Zextar said. I want to understand human tactics and strategy. Dr. Anderson walked to a shelf and pulled out several books. Well, there are many to choose from. Let's start with Alexander of Macedonia. He conquered most of the known world when he was very young. He opened a book and showed Zextar a picture of a young human man. Alexander became a military leader when he was only 20 years old. In just 13 years, he conquered an empire that stretched from Greece to India. His army never lost a battle. Zextar studied the picture. The human looked so young, almost like a child. How big was his army? Usually around 30 to 40,000 men, but he often fought against much larger forces. At the Battle of Gaugamela, he defeated an army of maybe 200,000 with only 47,000 soldiers. The numbers made Zextar uncomfortable. In his 300 battles, he had never commanded more than 5,000 soldiers at once, and he had certainly never faced an army of 200,000. What made him so successful? Zextar asked. Speed and tactics, Dr. Anderson replied. Alexander moved his army faster than anyone expected. He used cavalry charges and coordinated attacks. But most importantly, he always fought at the front with his soldiers. They followed him because they saw him share their dangers. Dr. Anderson turned the page and showed more pictures. But Alexander was just the beginning. Let me tell you about the Romans. For the next hour, Dr. Anderson told Zextar about Roman military engineering. The Romans built roads and bridges to move their armies quickly. They created siege weapons that could break down any wall. They developed tactics that allowed small forces to defeat much larger enemies. The Romans conquered and controlled most of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East for hundreds of years, Dr. Anderson explained. They did it with discipline, training, and superior organization. Zextar felt a growing unease in his stomach. The human military achievements were far more impressive than anything he had heard from other alien races. And these battles had happened thousands of years ago when humans were supposed to be primitive. What about more recent wars? Zextar asked. What happened closer to your space age? Dr. Anderson's expression became more serious. The 20th century was difficult for humans. We fought 2 world wars that involved most of the planet. The weapons became very powerful. Millions of people died. He pulled out another book and opened it to a page with pictures of large ships. Let me tell you about the Battle of Midway. It was a naval battle fought mostly with aircraft. Zextar looked at the pictures of the human warships. They were made of metal and looked very solid. How many ships were involved? The Americans had around 3 aircraft carriers and some smaller ships. The Japanese had 4 aircraft carriers and a much larger fleet. The Americans were heavily outnumbered. This sounded more familiar to Zextar. Fighting against superior numbers was something he understood. But the Americans won? He asked. Yes. They sank all 4 Japanese carriers and lost only one of their own. It was a decisive victory that changed the course of the war. Dr. Anderson showed him more pictures and explained how the battle was fought. The humans used flying machines that took off from ships. They attacked enemy ships from above, dropping bombs and firing weapons. It was like aerial cavalry, but much more complex. The key was intelligence, Dr. Anderson continued. The Americans had broken the Japanese codes. They knew where the enemy would be and when they would attack. Good information is often more valuable than more soldiers. Zextar nodded. He understood the importance of intelligence in warfare, but the scale of these human battles still amazed him. They fought with hundreds of ships and thousands of aircraft across vast oceans. Tell me about Stalingrad. Zextar said. Captain Rodriguez mentioned it last night. Dr. Anderson's face became grim. Stalingrad. That was one of the bloodiest battles in human history. The German army tried to capture the city. The Russian defenders refused to give up. He showed Zextar pictures of a destroyed city. Buildings were reduced to rubble. Streets were filled with debris and bodies. It looked like a vision of hell. The fighting went on for over 5 months. Soldiers fought for every building, every room, every staircase. Neither side would retreat. Both sides kept sending more soldiers into the battle, even when it was clear that most would die. How many soldiers fought there? Zextar asked quietly. Around 2 million total, maybe more. The exact numbers are hard to know because so many records were destroyed. 2 million soldiers. Zextar could not imagine such a number. His entire homeworld had only 10 million people. The idea of 2 million soldiers fighting in one battle was beyond his understanding. How many died? He asked. Close to 2 million, Dr. Anderson said softly. The battle killed almost everyone who fought in it. Soldiers, civilians, everyone. Zextar sat in silence for a long moment. In all his battles, he had never seen such destruction. The worst battle of his career had lasted 2 days and killed maybe 1,000 soldiers on both sides. He had thought that was terrible. Why did they keep fighting? He asked. Why didn't one side surrender? Dr. Anderson closed the book and looked at Zextar. Because humans don't surrender easily. When we decide something is worth fighting, for we keep fighting until we win or die. It's not always smart, but it's who we are. And this was normal for your world wars? Unfortunately, yes. Stalingrad was bad, but it wasn't the only battle like that. There were many sieges that lasted months or years. Many battles where hundreds of thousands died in a single day. Zextar felt very small suddenly. His 300 battles seemed like minor skirmishes compared to what humans had done to each other. These people had fought wars that involved entire continents and killed millions of people. Dr. Anderson, he said slowly, how many wars has your species fought? The old human smiled sadly. Commander, we've been fighting wars for our entire recorded history. Thousands of major wars, tens of thousands of smaller conflicts. We've probably fought more battles than any other species in the galaxy. Zextar left the library that day with his head spinning. Everything he thought he knew about warfare had been turned upside down. These humans, who seemed so casual about military matters, had more experience with war than any race he had ever encountered. And they were just getting started telling him their stories. Zextar could not stop thinking about what he had learned from Dr. Anderson. He walked through the station corridors, but his mind was far away. The numbers kept spinning in his head. 2 million soldiers at Stalingrad, thousands of wars throughout. Human history, battles that lasted for months or years. He found himself in the station's recreation area. It was a large room where humans went to relax after work. Some were playing games on tables. Others were exercising on strange machines. A few were just sitting and talking. In one corner, he saw a man in a green uniform sitting alone. The man was young, maybe 25 years old. He had short black hair and was reading something on a small computer screen. Zextar recognized the uniform. It was worn by human Marines, their elite soldiers. Zextar approached the Marine. The young man looked up and smiled. "Hello, Commander," he said, standing up. "I'm Sergeant Tony Walker. I heard you were visiting our station." "Yes," Zextar replied. "I am learning about human military history. Are you a soldier?" "Marine," Tony corrected with a small smile. "We're a bit different from regular soldiers. We specialize in difficult missions and hard fighting." Zextar sat down across from Tony. Maybe this young Marine could help him understand something that had been bothering him. "Sergeant Walker," he said, "I have fought in 300 battles across 40 star systems. I have commanded armies and won great victories. But today I learned that humans have fought wars far larger than anything I have experienced. How is this possible?" Tony set down his computer and looked thoughtful. "Well, sir, humans have been fighting for a very long time. We've had lots of practice. But your battles seem so extreme. Dr. Anderson told me about Stalingrad. 2 million soldiers fighting in one city. How do you fight a battle like that?" Tony's expression became serious. "Stalingrad was before my time, but we still study. The key was that both sides refused to give up. The Germans wanted the city and the Russians wouldn't let them have it. So they fought for every building, every street, every room." "That sounds like madness," Zextar said. "Maybe it was," Tony agreed. "But that's how humans fight sometimes. When something is important to us, we don't quit easily." "What makes something important enough to fight like that?" Tony was quiet for a moment. "Different things. Home, family, freedom, ideas we believe in." He looked at Zextar. "What do you fight for, Commander?" The question surprised Zextar. "Glory, honor, victory, The strength of my empire. Those are good reasons, Tony said. But humans often fight for smaller things, more personal things. A Marine might fight and die not for his country, but for the Marine next to him. A soldier might defend a city not because it's strategically important, but because his family lives there. This was a new idea for Zextar. Colonian warriors fought for the glory of their empire and their own honor. Personal feelings were considered weakness. Tell me about human tactics, Zextar said. How do you fight your wars? Tony smiled. We adapt. That's probably our biggest strength. We study our enemies and find their weaknesses. Then we develop new ways to fight them. He pulled out his computer and showed Zextar some pictures. These are from a battle on a planet called Normandy. Well, it was called D-Day. During the Second World War, Allied forces had to land on a beach that was heavily defended by German soldiers. The pictures showed thousands of human soldiers jumping out of boats and running across a beach. Enemy fire was hitting the water around them. Many soldiers were falling. This looks like suicide, Zextar said. It almost was, Tony agreed. But it worked. The generals knew that many soldiers would die, but they also knew it was the only way to win the war. So they sent wave after wave of men onto that beach. How many died? A few thousand on the first day, but they captured the beach. And that victory eventually led to winning the entire war. Zextar studied the pictures. He could not imagine ordering his soldiers to attack such a well-defended position. The losses would be enormous. Humans are willing to die in large numbers for victory? He asked. When necessary, Tony said. But we try to avoid it. We're always developing new tactics and weapons to fight smarter, not just harder. Tony showed him more pictures on his computer. Look at this. These are Special Forces soldiers. They work in small teams and use stealth and surprise instead of brute force. The pictures showed humans in dark clothing carrying advanced weapons. They looked dangerous despite their small size. We learned that sometimes a small team can accomplish what a large army cannot, Tony explained. These soldiers can sneak behind enemy lines, destroy important targets, and escape before anyone knows they were there. Interesting, Zextar said. Colonian warriors prefer direct combat. We consider stealth to be cowardly. Different approaches, Tony shrugged. We use whatever works. If stealth works, we use stealth. If we need to charge straight at the enemy, we do that too. Tony closed his computer and looked at Zextar directly. Commander, can I ask you something? Yes. In your battles, did you ever fight an enemy that you couldn't defeat with normal tactics? Zextar thought about this. Yes. The siege of Orthac Prime. We were outnumbered 50-1. Normal tactics would have failed. What did you do? I used the fortress walls to multiply our defensive power. I divided the enemy's attention with false attacks. I made them think we were stronger than we were. Tony nodded. That's good thinking. Humans do the same thing, but we take it further. We develop entirely new ways of fighting when the old ways don't work. He stood up and walked to a wall display. Look at this. This is from a war we fought in a place called Vietnam. The enemy used hit-and-run tactics. They would attack us and then disappear into the jungle. Our superior firepower couldn't help us because we couldn't find them. What did you do? We adapted. We developed new tactics for jungle fighting. We used smaller units and better intelligence. We learned to fight the enemy's way instead of forcing them to fight ours. Zextar was beginning to understand something important. You change your tactics for each enemy? Exactly. No two wars are the same. What works against one enemy might fail against another. So we study each situation and develop new strategies. Tony sat back down. That's why human military history is so complex. We've fought every kind of war you can imagine. Desert wars, jungle wars, mountain wars, ocean wars. We've fought with swords, guns, aircraft, and now spaceships. Each war taught us something new. And you remember all these lessons? We try to. We have schools where we study old battles. We read books about famous generals and their tactics. We want to learn from their successes and their mistakes. A thought occurred to Zextar. Sergeant Walker, how many wars has your species fought? Tony laughed, but it was not a happy sound. Thousands, Commander. Major wars, minor wars, civil wars, colonial wars. We've been fighting almost continuously for our entire recorded history. That is... Zextar paused, trying to find the right words. That is far more than any other species I know. Yeah, Tony said quietly. We're good at war, maybe too good. That's why a lot of us don't like talking about it much. War is necessary sometimes, but it's not something to be proud of. Not proud of? Zextar was confused. But you have achieved great victories. Your tactics are brilliant. Your courage is remarkable. Tony looked sad. Yes, but war always costs something. Lives, resources, time we could have spent building instead of destroying. Most human veterans will tell you the same thing. We fight when we have to, but we'd rather not fight at all. This was very different from Colonian thinking. On his homeworld, warriors were the most respected members of society. Their battle stories were told for generations. Sergeant Walker, Zextar said slowly, I am beginning to think that humans understand war better than any species in the galaxy. Tony nodded. We've had a lot of practice, but Commander, I hope we never have to use that knowledge again. The galaxy is big enough for everyone to live in peace. As Zextar left the recreation area, he thought about what Tony had told him. Humans fought not for glory or honor, but for more personal reasons. They adapted their tactics to each enemy. They learned from every battle, and despite their incredible military achievements, they wished they didn't have to fight at all. It was all very confusing for a warrior who had spent his life seeking glory in battle. On his last day at the human station, Zextar sat alone in the observation deck. Through the large windows, he could see stars scattered across the darkness of space. His transport ship would arrive soon to take him home, but he did not feel ready to leave. Everything had changed during his visit. When he arrived, he had been proud of his 300 battles. He had expected the humans to bow before his military experience. He had planned to offer his services as their military advisor and teacher. Now he felt small and confused. The humans had shown him that his greatest victories were tiny compared to their wars. They had fought battles with millions of soldiers. They had developed tactics that made his strategies seem simple, and somehow they had done all of this while barely thinking about it. The door to the observation deck opened. Ambassador Carter walked in and sat down beside him. She did not say anything at first. They both looked out at the stars in silence. You seem troubled, Commander, she said finally. Zextar turned his 4 eyes toward her. I came here thinking I was a great warrior, he said quietly. I thought my experience would impress your people. I thought you would want to learn from me. And now? Now I realize that I know nothing about war. Your people have fought more battles than I can count. Your tactics are more advanced than anything I learned in military school. Your soldiers fight for reasons I do not understand. Ambassador Carter nodded. I can see how that would be overwhelming. Captain Rodriguez told me about Stalingrad in 1 minute like it was just another story. But that battle was larger than all my wars combined. Dr. Anderson showed me pictures of conflicts I cannot even imagine. Sergeant Walker talked about adapting tactics like it was normal behavior. Zextar's voice became even quieter. I spent my life trying to become a great warrior, but compared to humans, I am just a beginner. Ambassador Carter was silent for a moment. Then she spoke carefully. Commander, can I tell you something about how we see you? Yes. When we received word that you were coming, we were honored. Your reputation for fair dealing and honorable combat is known throughout this sector. Other alien races speak of you with respect. But you were not impressed by my military record. We were impressed, Carter said, but in a different way than you expected. She turned to face him directly. Commander, you have fought 300 battles, that is remarkable. But what impressed us most was learning that you always tried to minimize civilian casualties. You negotiated surrenders when possible instead of demanding total victory. You treated prisoners with dignity. Zextar blinked. Those things had never seemed important to him before. They were just practical decisions. You see, Carter continued, humans have a lot of experience with war. Too much experience. We know what happens when warriors fight only for glory and conquest. We know the cost of battles fought without honor or restraint. What do you mean? We have seen what war looks like when it becomes about destroying the enemy instead of protecting what you value. We have watched cities burn and entire populations die because someone wanted to prove their strength. Carter pointed out the window at the stars. Every star system out there has species that remember human conflicts with fear. Not because we won so many battles, but because of how brutal some of those battles became. Your wars were brutal, some of them. When humans fight each other, we can be very cruel. We developed weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. We created tactics designed to break the enemy's will by targeting their families and homes. Zextar felt a chill. Why would you do such things? Because we lost sight of why we were fighting. Some of our leaders decided that winning was more important than honor. They forgot that the enemy soldiers were people like us, with families and hopes. Carter's voice became sad. It took us a long time to learn that how you fight a war is as important as whether you win it. And now? Now we try to fight only when necessary. And when we do fight, we try to remember our humanity. We try to be the kind of warriors who protect rather than conquer. Zextar thought about this. But your tactics are still advanced. Your strategies are still brilliant. Yes, we learned those things through hard experience. But we also learned that the best victory is one that ends quickly with the least suffering for everyone involved. The door opened again. Engineer Nicole Hayes walked in. She was carrying a small bag and looked like she had been crying. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said. "I just wanted to say goodbye to Commander Zextar before he leaves." "Please, sit with us," Carter said. Nicole sat down and wiped her eyes. "I just received a message from home. My brother is being deployed with the Human Defense Corps, another border conflict with the Nexus Alliance." "I'm sorry," Zextar said. "Is this a dangerous assignment?" "Maybe. Probably. The Nexus has been testing our defenses for months. My brother thinks it will turn into a real war soon." "Your brother is a soldier?" "Yes. He joined the Defense Corps 3 years ago. He says someone has to protect human space, and he wanted to do his part." Zextar felt curious. "Is he excited about the possibility of combat?" Nicole looked surprised. "Excited? No, not at all. He's scared. We all are. He doesn't want to fight. He just wants to protect people." "He does not seek glory in battle?" "Glory?" Nicole laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Commander, my brother joined the military because he believes in protecting others. If he could keep everyone safe without ever firing a shot, he would be perfectly happy. But if he must fight, then he'll fight, and he'll use every trick and tactic humans have learned over thousands of years. He'll adapt to whatever the enemy throws at him. He'll do whatever it takes to win quickly and come home alive. And if he wins?" Nicole looked sad. "If he wins, he'll be relieved. Not proud, not happy, just relieved that it's over and he can come home. That's how most human soldiers feel about victory." Zextar was quiet for a long moment. This was so different from Colonian thinking. His people celebrated their warriors as heroes. They told stories about glorious battles and famous victories. "Nicole," he said slowly, "why do humans not celebrate their military victories?" "Because we know the real cost of war," she replied. "Every victory means someone didn't come home. Every battle leaves scars that never fully heal. My grandfather fought in 3 different wars. He had medals and honors, but he never displayed them. He said they reminded him of friends who died. He was not proud of his service. He was proud that he did his duty. But he was sad about the necessity of it. He used to say that the best soldier is one who fights to end fighting." Carter nodded. "That's a common feeling among human veterans. They're proud of their service and their sacrifice, but they wish it hadn't been necessary." The announcement came over the station's communication system. Zextar's transport had arrived. It was time for him to leave. As he stood up, Carter touched his arm gently. Commander, I want you to know something. Your 300 battles may seem small compared to human military history, but they were your battles fought with honor and dignity. That matters more than the numbers. Thank you, Zextar said. This visit has taught me much. What will you tell your people when you return home? Zextar thought about this question as they walked toward the docking bay. What would he tell them? That humans were the most experienced warriors in the galaxy? That their tactics were more advanced than anything Colonians had developed? That they had fought wars so large they defied imagination? I will tell them, he said finally, that I met a species that understands war better than anyone else but wishes they didn't have to. At the docking bay, several humans had gathered to say goodbye. Captain Rodriguez, Dr. Anderson, Sergeant Walker, and others he had met during his stay. They shook his hands and wished him safe travels. As his transport left the station, Zextar looked back through the window. The human station grew smaller until it was just another light among the stars. But the lessons he had learned there would stay with him forever. For the first time in his long military career, Zextar found himself truly silent about his battles. He finally understood that some victories were worth more than others, and that the greatest warriors were often those who fought not for glory, but for the simple right to go home. The galaxy's most experienced alien warrior had learned humility from the most experienced warriors of all.